Earlier, I spoke with Annie Farmer. She survived sexual abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and has advocated for the full release of the Epstein files. Please take a listen. First question, Annie. You appeared on the steps of the Capitol not so long ago advocating for the discharge petition, a legislative vehicle to possibly win the release of all the Epstein files. How are you feeling at this moment when it appears that might actually happen in the House?
It was incredible to see Grijalva, sworn in yesterday finally, and know that her signature gets us, one very big step closer to pursuing this transparency that we've all come together to support and really to demand. So I think it felt surreal for many of us to know that we were closer to the truth than ever before.
There are those who look at this, Annie, and wonder, is there a political agenda? Do you want to address that?
I'd be happy to address that. Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the many frustrations that survivors in this case have felt and expressed is that this case has been politicized, but it is not political. This is not a partisan issue. The sexual abuse of children and young women is in no way partisan. And in fact, when my sister Maria Farmer first reported this, that was 1996. We've had 5 administrations come and go since then, right? Like many directors of the FBI. This is always something that survivors have wanted, is more information about what went wrong here. Why didn't we see justice? So the fact that there has been more call and interest at this time, I think that just means that Americans are learning more and are more interested in wanting that information to be released. But for us, it is not political.
And of course, some now in positions of prominence within the Trump administration were vocally calling for that transparency not so long ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that that's one of the things that is confusing to us is that there have been people that are part of the administration that campaigned on making sure that these files would be released. And I think that really made a lot of Americans, more curious and want to understand what had gone wrong. And now they're in positions of power, and we're just saying, please follow through with your promises, right? And it hasn't happened. And in fact, the way that things have unfolded, it felt like just one stall after another. And that's really hard on the individuals that, like myself, my sister, so many of the survivors I know personally. This trickle of information is really difficult, right? We're just asking for the full files to be released, so we don't have to continue to live, in this roller coaster world where you never know what's coming one day to the next.
When I talked to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, about this several weeks ago, he said, well, we need to be very careful about the victims, about the survivors, and that we don't release information that is harmful to them, either reputationally or otherwise. From your vantage point, Annie Farmer, is that a valid point of view?
Of course, it is important that survivors who do not want to be revealed would not be revealed. But I think that this Epstein Transparency Act has that built into it. And I feel that unfortunately protecting the survivors is being used as an excuse to delay the release of this information. All of the survivors that I know and am in touch with are in support of this bill because it does have provisions built in for that. So saying, no, we can't pass this legislation because we need to protect survivors, I don't believe it.
You have a unique perspective on all this, Annie. You are, I believe, the only person to identify yourself by name and testify against, and correct me if I'm wrong, both Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So you have been among the most brave, if not the most brave survivor. All of this cascading around you, I just want to check, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Well, I guess for me, I want to say that I think, my ability to come forward and speak out is really based on the women that have inspired me. First of all, my sister, Maria Farmer, who was the first to report Epstein in 1996. And then also very much Virginia Giuffre. I think right now the world is getting to know her better through her memoir. And her powerful example of being so bold and clear about speaking out about these crimes was also, very much an inspiration for me. But I think that luckily there are many of us, and as we come together, I think we just feel stronger and stronger. The more voices we have, the louder we get. And I think that we are nervous right now because it feels like there's a lot at stake. But I also think we feel really emboldened. And I'm hopeful that we're at a place where we are really going to see that all of us coming together is going to make a difference.
Before I let you go, Annie, two questions. President Trump again this week described this as the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And there have been lots of reporting about the way that Ghislaine Maxwell has been treated in this different federal prison she has been moved to. I'd like your thoughts on both.
Sure. Yeah. First, in terms of the comment about it being a hoax, I think it's I feel confused about what that means. I've never know what he means when he says that. Obviously, there's so many of us. I don't think the American people think this is a hoax. But what I will say is there has been a lot of misinformation that has floated around this case for a long time. And actually, that misinformation is very damaging to those of us involved. And very confusing. And so, in my mind, the best way of making sure we have the facts about this straight and we can separate fact from fiction when it comes to the Epstein case is to release all of the DOJ's files, right? They investigated. There's a ton of information. So I think that that just speaks to the importance of transparency. And then on your second question, in terms of Maxwell's treatment, I think we've just seen more and more that it feels like she is getting this privileged treatment that is not typical for an inmate, especially someone who is a sex offender at her level. And it's extremely problematic. It seems like further evidence that there's these two different sort of systems of justice at play. And because of her connections and because of her privilege, and perhaps because of what she knows, she is being given, benefits that others are not. And I think it sends a very dangerous message. And I hope that ends.
Annie Farmer, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Major.
Jeffrey Epstein's survival, Danielle Bensky joins me now. Danny, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
First, I know it's difficult, it's not pleasant, but let my audience know, in whatever terms you want to discuss it, your relationship with Epstein and the apartment complex in New York.
Yeah, so I was recruited in 2004. I was 17 years old. A woman approached me and said that I could make some money as a masseuse. I was a dancer. I had come from the dance world.
Ballerina.
Aspiring ballerina. And so this woman approached me and said, it sounds like body work, right? You're a dancer. And you should come and meet this gentleman on the Upper East Side. And so I went, and at first it started as just a job. And then my mother, unfortunately, had a brain tumor and was very, very ill. And I found the scans. I had thought that Jeffrey's money had come from the medical profession. He had all of these pictures around the house of naked women, and there was one particular sculpture that was of a brain, and we didn't really have the internet the same way that we do now, right? And so I think the only piece that was out there on Jeffrey at that point was Mystery Money Man, or Money Man of Mystery. So we just didn't have a ton of information on him, but so I had brought him my mother's scans, and the world shifted for me. He basically leveraged them and said that he would withhold care for her if I didn't either recruit more girls to massage him, or that I was going to have to do a lot more. And I did not recruit anybody. I was so ashamed of what I was already doing there. And so basically,
the exploitation increased after that.
Yeah, I mean, the abuse increased. I mean, it was full-blown sexual abuse, and for a year. And once I knew that my mother was going to rehabilitate and be okay, I was able to extricate myself from that position. But, you have to remember the incredible manipulation. It was a systematic manipulation that would occur. Even from the very beginning, he would talk about other ballet dancers that had been to the mansion and how like ABT was amazing. And he had so many girls that were masseuses from ABT because they
ABT
knew
is
American Ballet Theater.
okay.
Yeah. I don't know if any of this is true, of course, but he would talk about these big ballet companies, and of course, part of me was like, well, that's my world. I understand that world.
He might be entree into this world. Might give me credibility or introduce me to people.
And he said that he would often use that piece that was always, oh, do you want to meet a ballet master at New York City Ballet? I know everybody. And of course, those were people that I admired quite a bit. And so he was looking for the way in all the time, right? I never quite found it with me until he had the brain scans. And then that piece, you could feel the shift in the room where I knew...
Change the power dynamic.
The power dynamic, that's exactly right. And the abuse of power was extreme. So from that moment forward...
So for you and those in this very unfortunate community of survivors, what do the Epstein files represent to you? And what do you think they will teach the American public if they are ever fully released?
I see my 17-year-old self in those files. I see, I think many of us survivors, looking at who we were then with all of our hopes, all of our dreams, all the things that we were aspiring to, all the promises that he made. I think that it brings us right back to that place. I want to be able to hug my 17-year-old self and say, it's all going to be okay. Other women will not have to go through this, and mean it. And right now, I don't necessarily feel that. I think without the transparency, we don't even know what the process to accountability is, right? We need to have that clear path of looking through the emails, and it's a lot, I understand it's a lot. But
financial records and
all of it.
Who might have assisted in one way or another financially or some other means?
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the time survivors are getting just names, and then that'll be the road there. But first of all, it's very scary to come forward and name a ton of names of powerful people. But also survivors are doing it through litigation. And I know I have a piece of litigation out there for the accountant and the lawyer of the estate. There have been many other pieces of litigation that have been brought forward that have named names. And I even saw somebody dressed up for Halloween with the list,
Right.
So there is a lot out there that you can point to, but we need the facts before we can move forward.
And as you watch Congress wrestle with this, what are your thoughts? What do you want them to do?
We want them to release everything.
Or you want the president? As I just mentioned, the president could do this himself.
It would be great. It's, again, for us, you've heard it so many times, right? We talk about this on every, you've heard from a ton of survivors. There are 1,000 of us, and we always say this is not political. It is a human issue. It is a moral issue. It is what I would ask my tiny 5-year-old son to do. Just do the right thing, right? Release everything so that we understand the full breadth of what we're even looking at. So I just hope that everybody does the right thing so that anybody who has done any harm is just brought in for accountability and so that we can see some justice.
I want to play for you sound yesterday from Meet the Press. Republican Senator John Barrasso. Please listen. Technical problem with that, Danny. We're trying to fix that. If the control room can let me know if it has been fixed,
we'll take a look at it. If it passes the House, we'll see what it says. And we all want accountability and transparency. But to me, this is not about truth. It's not about justice. This is about an attempt by the Democrats to make President Trump a lame duck president.
How do you evaluate that?
Yeah. We have...
Not about truth, not about justice.
We have survivors on both sides. We have
of the aisle, politically.
Republican, we have Democratic, we have some that don't want to be political at all and are like, I don't follow politics. We are so human. And so I think in looking at that, and we even have had survivors step forward and say, I voted for Trump. I am a Republican, right? So I think that...
and even say it's not about him.
Totally, and it's not. And I guess that's the whole point here, right? Is that we keep coming into this political realm and this political arena, but actually it's It's just not at its core. It's just not, because I think we are every woman. We are actually a cross section of the American people, and it's a great representation of American women. When you look at our faces, we are all races, religions, creeds, political affiliations, and our stories are pretty close, I would say, for a lot of us. And we didn't know each other going into this. When you have 1,000 women, right? You think about that number, 1,000, and you have at least 24 who are very forward facing right now. And we're all saying the same thing, regardless of our background, regardless of anything that came before. We're saying this is important. We need to stop this. We need to stop this from perpetuating. For those girls who I'm a choreographer, I teach dance. And I often, I'm teaching the girls that were the age that I was. And so I'm watching them and I'm thinking to myself, we just have to make it safer for them. We have to make sure that, every once in a while I'll overhear something and I'm like, that feels really unsafe. That feels like a really hard position that you've been put in. And it just takes me right back to my own trauma. And I think we just have to make sure that they're growing up in a very, very safe world.
Danielle Bensky, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
The House has voted on the bill to force the Justice Department to release those files, the files involving the government's investigation into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there was one no vote. It still needs to get through the Senate. Leader John Thune has been non-committal about bringing it up for a vote. The president says if it reaches his desk, he would sign it. A lot of critics say the president doesn't need congressional approval. You could just request the Justice Department to release the files right now. President Trump strongly opposed the plan for months until he reversed course Sunday. Last week, the president asked the Justice Department to investigate any ties between Epstein and powerful Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton, who has denied any wrongdoing. One of those Democrats is Harvard professor and former Treasury Secretary under Clinton, Larry Summers. He says he is stepping back from public life after messages between him and Epstein were released. He says he is deeply ashamed of his actions and recognizes the pain they have caused. CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small joined us from Capitol Hill. Torian, what happened with the vote?
Yeah, Lindsay, we saw 427 to 1. That is a pretty resounding vote in the affirmative for this bill. Near unanimous. The one lawmaker defector in this is Clay Higgins, a Republican from Louisiana, who's also part of the Freedom Caucus. We're working to get his statement on why he voted against this. But ultimately, though, this is exactly what many, including quite a few Republicans, expected to happen. Even House Speaker Mike Johnson suggested that this would be well on its way to the Senate, even though he had some reservations about the bill as it stands, one of which is privacy for some of the victims named in these files, as they're set to be released in a very public manner in a searchable and downloadable format as per the rules of this law. It now heads over to the Senate, where Leader Thune is likely to consider amendments, considering he had a conversation with Speaker Johnson about this before it heads to the floor. If that happens and it passes out of the Senate with those changes, it would have to come back to the House for a vote before it makes it to the president's desk. One other thing, Lindsay, I want to bring up is what Representative Thomas Massie, the Republican who kind of led the charge on this, brought up. He took issue and had pause when President Trump made that very notable pivot. When President Trump said that he's also looking to investigate Democrats connected to Epstein, Massie thought that could be a ploy to potentially thwart the full release of these files, saying that a provision in the law under an active investigation could prohibit the Department of Justice from releasing these files. We'll have to see what happens next, but that is what we're watching as this moves forward.
And while we've been talking just a few minutes ago, Representative Clay Higgins did post on X saying he has been a principled no on this bill from the beginning. He was saying what was wrong with the bill 3 months ago is still wrong today. He says if enacted in its current form, this type of broad reveal of criminal investigative files released to a rabid media will absolutely result in innocent people being hurt. So that aside, what does this passing mean for those survivors who spoke earlier on the steps on Capitol Hill?
It's what they've been advocating for, Lindsay. They said, get the politics out of this. They just want to see justice in the form of transparency. That's also what Marjorie Taylor Greene, another notable Republican who, because of this, essentially has caused a pretty public falling out with President Trump. She says she's been the target of death threats because she's been such a vocal advocate for this bill when Donald Trump was not. So it's caused, in her mind, a massive rift to the party. But ultimately, though, she says this is for the benefit of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. She and other Republicans who have been pretty supportive has says this has nothing to do with Donald Trump in their minds. This is just about seeking justice for the victims of the convicted sex offender, Lindsay.
Walk us through some of how we got here, specifically as it pertains to the rift that it has caused within the Republican Party, with some former staunch allies, fervent supporters of President Trump, breaking with him and now finding themselves on the other side of his ire.
Yeah, President Trump has maintained that this is a hoax perpetuated by Democrats, which is why he had quite a bit of backlash against any Republican who essentially endorsed that discharge petition going forth. This was also came as House Speaker Mike Johnson said that he didn't want to take up any legislation around this. He said that the House Oversight Committee was working its own investigation and actively releasing all documents that it received from the Epstein estate. However, that just didn't sit well with other Republicans like Thomas Massie, for example, who said that this isn't the transparency that not just the Trump administration, but the Republican leadership team promised, which is why they moved forward with this. Ultimately, though, as it crosses the finish line, we have to question what's next when it comes to President Trump. If that investigation will impede the full release of this, as Thomas Massie has laid out, and then whether or not Leader Thune will take it up and consider those changes that he talked about with Speaker Johnson, or if he'll heed the advice of other members of the Senate, particularly Democrats like Chuck Schumer, and just push this through immediately and send this to the president's desk.
So the vote passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act 427-1. We've been discussing how the representative from Louisiana, Clay Higgins, was the lone no vote. Are we expecting, if these files do end up getting released, that they will be heavily redacted?
Potentially. I mean, that would be what the amendments are calling for if the Senate were to take it up and make those changes. But we'll see what the DOJ says. If there is litigation or anything within their legal means they could do to prevent this from moving forward. But also we have to look at the optics here. Democrats, since Trump took office, has framed this debate as the Trump administration, as the Republican Party looking to cover up or protect. Republicans, however, has the burden of running on this in 2024, saying that their rise to power, their majority, and winning the White House would give them the opportunity to release this. There was a very public display when Trump took office of conservative influencers being invited to the White House to receive what they called the Epstein files. That certainly wasn't this, but the Trump administration has made an effort in the past to at least show that they're willing to divulge information. It's curious as to why there was so much pushback on this, considering there isn't an active investigation, or there wasn't up to this point, why the president was so against this. But as we saw, both sides ultimately deciding in this vote to send this across the aisle and to send this to the president's desk, at least the first step of that happening today, Lindsay.
Torian Small, thank you.